Hello, welcome to this video. And I've already done 2 videos for the Mental Awareness month of May. This month also happens to be my birthday month, and I'm very excited because of the new year that God has generously given to me. And as I had said, I'm going to redefine the frontiers of mental health awareness by considering macro policies and health and mental health. In this section, I'm going to discuss the macro level effects on psychological distress. And the title of this video is The Macro Level, the Architecture of Institutional Power. To understand the systemic roots of psychological distress, we must lift our eyes from individual biochemistry and look directly at the distribution of institutional power. The macro level consists of massive overarching structures that dictate the material conditions of human life. These structures are controlled by an elite class who wield distinct, interlocking forms of power to marginalize, control, and oppress populations. These include military power, such as state violence, tear gas, and physical coercion. They also wield economic power, predatory taxes, debt, and removal of substances. Then they wield constitutional power, which is legislative manipulation and executive overreach. Then they have judicial power, which is legalized evictions, denied redress, and court impunity. Military and coercive power, the normalization of terror. The most overt form of macro power is the state's monopoly of physical violence. When governments deploy police forces, paramilitary units, and military personnel to suppress dissent, clear informal settlements, or enforce unpopular mandates, they are indirectly engineering a traumatized citizenry, living under constant threat of state violence, where peaceful demonstrations are met with tear gas, water cannons, rubber bullets, and live ammunition, instills a deep sense of collective helplessness. This structural terror fractures the foundational psychological requirement of human well-being, the perception of safety without the groundwork for widespread complex post-traumatic stress disorder across entire community. Economic and financial power, manufactured scarcity. Economic power is perhaps the most pervasive driver of macro-level psychological trauma. Wealth is not merely an abstract scorecard. It determines an individual's access to nutrition, shelter, healthcare, and education. When those in power implement economic policies that enrich a small elite or systematically impoverishing the working majority, they are practicing a form of structural violence. By shifting tax burden onto basic consumer goods, defunding public infrastructure, and allowing corporate monopolies to fix prices, the state manufactures artificial scarcity. This forces the average citizen into a growing daily struggle for basic survival. This constraint this constant financial precarity erodes an individual's sense of agency, leaving them feeling completely helpless to protect themselves and their children from starvation or from homelessness. A psychological audit of socioeconomic stressors in Kenya to see these abstract macro-level dynamics in action, we need look no further than contemporary Kenya. The nation is currently grappling with an acute mental health crisis that is deeply intertwined with a series of aggressive economic policies and state actions. Examining these specific structural stressors reveals the profound psychological toll they inflict on millions of citizens. Economic stressors and their psychological consequences. Housing levy deduction. It results to chronic financial anxiety. You can imagine somebody who had loan, they were paying school fees, they were doing what? Then all of a sudden, a housing levy is introduced. This person is in frequent chronic anxiety as they try to balance accounts and nobody informed them about it or asked them whether they should have their salary deducted. Record high fuel prices, depletion of cognitive reserves. Again, the already taxed individuals, they are being subjected to a lot of thinking. How do I cope? How do I get to work? How do I get my children to school? How do I take someone to hospital? This cognitive distress is caused by the high level of fuel prices, demolition of markets and micro businesses. This shatters identity and initiates acute trauma. Imagine seeing your entire livelihood being bulldozed, being brought down to waste. What type of trauma are you put under? Soaring loan interest rates. Of course, people lose self-actualization, but they are affected. What do? I took this loan within this context, but now it has gone up. Removal of health and education subsidy. Existential dread and despair. What does it mean? Many people cannot access healthcare and are in homes sick. They go to hospital when they are already very sick. When they can no longer hold it, they medicate themselves with the counter prescriptions. They don't go to hospital at the right time. State violence and protest killing. You can imagine the hyper-vigilance and collective PTSD, post-traumatic stress, that these individuals have. The housing levy, financial insecurity via predatory taxation, the introduction of mandatory deductions such as housing levy represents a direct attack on the disposable income of Kenyan workers in an economy already hollowed out by high inflation and stagnant wages. Stripping an additional percentage from a worker's monthly paycheck forces painful, immediate sacrifices. The psychological impact of this financial drain is immediate. When an individual's net pay is consistently cut by state mandates, they are forced into a state of chronic financial anxiety. Parents find themselves running agonizing mental calculations. How do I cover rent? How do I pay for food? What happens if my child falls ill? This constant financial pressure depletes individuals' cognitive bandwidth. It leaves them in a state of perpetual mental exhaustion, making it incredibly difficult to engage in long-term planning, nurture relationships, or maintain emotional stability. Exorbitant fuel prices, compounding cost of survival. Fuel is the lifeblood of the Kenyan economy. When the state policies drive fuel prices to historical highs, the financial shockwaves ripple through every single sector of society. The cost of public transport skyrockets, the price of basic food staples climbs, and the cost of keeping electricity running surges. For ordinary citizens, expensive fuel makes everyday life an exhausting hurdle. A simple commute to work becomes an expensive burden. Small-scale traders watch their profit margins disappear as transport costs consume their revenues. This relentless increase in the cost of living breeds a deep sense of helplessness. It sends a clear, distressing message to the population. No matter how hard you work, the system will always find a way to keep you falling behind. In the next video, I'll look at the demolition of informal markets, the destruction of livelihood and identity. Among the most traumatizing actions a state can take against its people is the sudden violent demolition of informal markets and small businesses. In Kenya, where the informal sector employs a massive portion of the population, these markets are much more than concrete stalls or wooden kiosks. They are lifelines for survival. The demolition leads to immediate loss of income, existential panic, shattering of identity as a provider, acute loss of identity, acute loss of community and mutual aid scaffolding. when bulldozers escorted by armed police threaten market under the guise of urban renewal or planning, they destroy decades of hard work and community resilience in a matter of hours. For the market trader, this is incredibly traumatic event. It represents the immediate loss of livelihood, the destruction of financial independence, and sudden plunge into debt beyond financial devastation. This demolition strip individuals of their dignity and self-worth. In a society that ties a person's value to ability to provide their family, losing your business to a state bulldozer is a deeply identity-shattering experience. It frequently triggers severe acute depression and can lead to complete psychological breakdown. Yeah, as I said, ungiwe mbere ya hinya, rekei tuthome, rekei tuhige. Let's learn. Knowledge is beyond strength. Let's learn. Let's be aware of the stressors that affect us. Let us be wise. Let us understand the systems that cause us stress. I hope you are welcome to the next video on the soaring loan interest rates, the trap of debt bondage. Thank you.